I remember driving to work one day in Cleveland, and I'm on the main highway going in from the west side suburbs. And I thought to myself, as an engineer, I started adding up in my head, like, how many hours am I spending in this car every day? And I think it might have been a day where there was a little bit of a traffic jam or something. And I added it up, and I got up to like 300 hours conservatively. And I was like, whoa, that's like 2 man months, that I'm spending in my car, going 45 minutes into town and 45 minutes back every single day. And I thought, wow, what a waste. And so a couple of weeks later, and a couple of conversations with Govind, I was like, you know what? Let's save the money on the office. Let's go virtual. And we can do that. We already had a few of the tools. Not everything worked out. It was a little bumpy at first, but yeah. So we pulled the trigger, put out a press release, went virtual, and the rest is history.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to the Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at the Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Doug Bowers, Vaughn Johnson, and Carl Walsh. What do you guys have for our listeners this week?
Today, we welcome Mike Hansborough to the Oval Table. Mike is the co-founder and CEO of a global software development firm with no central address, no headquarters, and no office space. Mike operates a virtual company with employees, contractors, and customers the world over. He shares the benefits and challenges of operating virtually, a practice he pioneered long before the pandemic caused companies to operate remotely. And Mike also discusses the importance of data security and the growth of cloud-based solutions. Before we get to Mike, we want to recognize the passing of Ron Popeil, America's pitchman.
Ron Popeil is somebody that has been in my life for most of it. This is a guy who invented so much in terms of modern, televised pitching of ridiculously stupid products, and made a fortune doing it. The first one that I remember, Carl, was the Vegematic. And that was, it slices, it dices, it makes hundreds of julienne fries in a single stroke. This guy was incredible.
Exactly. He got his start, it turns out, by going to flea markets and in Woolworths, pitching stuff. And he said that his style was based on the fact that he's talking to people who came here to buy something else. They are not there for him. And he had to figure out how to get their attention, get them interested in something they had no interest in before, and then to reach into their pocket or reach into their purse and come out with money and give it to him. And with all of his products that he sold, the Chop-O-Matic, which his father actually invented, then the Vegematic and the Pocket Fisherman, Smokeless Ashtray, Mr. Microphone, Mince-O-Matic, all the Ronco electric food dehydrator, Ronco Seal a Meal, on and on and on. And perhaps his most important invention, which is, but wait, there's more.
That plus the fact that everything cost $19.99. Now, that means that every product that Ron Popeil pitched had to have a cost structure well below $19.99, including the materials, the packaging, the marketing, the everything. And I mean, that by itself is phenomenal, because you always knew when a Popeil commercial came on television, it was usually late at night, you knew before they got to it that the price was going to be only $19.99. And then the but wait, there's more was typically tied to some kind of premium. some knives. You get two. You get two for the price of one. That was another one that he did. I think his last product, now that I think about it, was his last product, and I just saw him do this about 6-7 months ago, was a rotisserie, a device that sat on the kitchen counter and was a rotisserie and an oven and a convection oven and all this stuff. And his pitch there was set it and forget it.
And that was another big pitch of his. And hey, remember, even Steve Jobs had his own version of, but wait, there's more, when he introduced
just one more thing.
Yes, just one more thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just one more thing. So a lot of people learned from Ron Popeil.
Getting into the rhythm, and he talked about the music of his pitch and how he approached people and how he would ask questions and answer them. That was a very important part of his pitch. And for a guy that started out hawking stuff in Walmart and flea markets, when he passed away, he was worth $200 million. That is the best pitch man of the 20th century, bar none.
I agree.
To your point, Vaughn, about the costs, he in an interview, he said that the price of a product, effectively, it needs to be 5 times the cost in order to make a profit, after you factor in production, distribution, and marketing costs. So your $25 gizmo needs to cost $5.
Right. $5.
If you're enjoying this podcast, wait till you get your hands on Doug's book, We Are Alpha Dogs, available on Amazon and wherever books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. Go to wearealphadogs.com for bonuses and downloads to help you and your company become legendary. And if you are especially adventurous, while you're at it, take the dog quiz and find out more about who you really are. Now, back to the Oval Table.
Well, today we have the pleasure of welcoming Mike Hansbrough to the Oval Table. Mike is the CEO of MCF Technology Solutions, a senior advisor for MCF Media, and a member of the Toxa Technology Solutions Board. Since 2008, under Mike's leadership, MCF Tech has created a global organization that rapidly delivers solutions to complex business problems for many of the world's leading companies, both large and small. Mike's 33 years of business experience spans operations, product management, quality control, engineering, manufacturing, distribution, marketing, global supply chain, real estate, and project management. This experience, can you believe that this experience has informed MCF Tech's business-first design strategy that delivers transformational improvement and operational agility via tailored cloud-based solution software applications. Mike, welcome to the Oval Table.
Thank you, Vaughn, and congratulations for getting all that in one breath.
So, Mike, MCF Technology Solutions is a software developer and systems integrator. And you also operate virtually with no central office, which today, because of the pandemic, has become kind of in vogue. But you've been doing it for a number of years. Can you kind of tell us how that happened?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. We didn't start out that way. We wanted to have the cool tech office. And even though we're in Cleveland, Ohio, we wanted to act like we're in Silicon Valley. We had a small office in near downtown Cleveland, Ohio. And it was cool. We had our foosball table and our bubble hockey table. And we started out, really small. And as a startup, and we grew and we got up to about 10 people in that office. And there was 2 things that I think really were the catalyst to going virtual. One was that my partner in crime, Govind Davis at the time, my business partner, decided that, what we did was something he could live anywhere. And he was right. And he wanted to move to Austin, Texas for a lot of good reasons. And he did that. And then afterwards, we had a couple people followed him actually who wanted to move down there. And I remember driving to work one day in Cleveland, and I'm on the main highway going in from the west side suburbs. And I thought to myself, as an engineer, I started adding up in my head, like, how many hours am I spending in this car every day? And I think it might have been a day where there was a little bit of a traffic jam or something. And I added it up and I got up to like 300 hours conservatively. And I was like, whoa, that's like 2 man months, that I'm spending in my car going 45 minutes into town and 45 minutes back every single day. And I thought, wow, what a waste. And so a couple of weeks later, and a couple of conversations with Govind, I was like, you know what? Let's save the money on the office. Let's go virtual. And we can do that. We already had a few of the tools. Not everything worked out. It was a little bumpy at first, but yeah. So we pulled the trigger, put out a press release, went virtual, and the rest is history. And that was probably 2010.
Wow. You were really ahead of the curve there. What are the benefits and challenges of running a company virtually that you've encountered?
I'll start with the benefits, really. And if you break that down, there's a benefit to your employees. There's a benefit to the company and management, if you will. There's a benefit to our customers. And so there's pros and cons for all those categories, and really maybe even our supply chain, our vendors as well. I'll include them. But the biggest benefits right away were the time savings, the fact that people didn't have to spend money on gas. They didn't have to spend money on dry cleaning or business attire as much. Although when we do video sharing nowadays, we do have a company attire that people use when we're on with our clients. So we have logoed shirts, but they're still business casual. This didn't happen right away, but it started to allow us flexibility in our hiring. And if I had to pick out the biggest benefit that I think it created was that we were now able to hire people anywhere. And we were able to hire people oftentimes at a lower cost, because being virtual afforded them something in their life that they valued more than just salary. For example, taking care of an elderly parent. Our lead project manager has a llama ranch in Idaho, and she couldn't do that with a traditional job where she's going into the office every day and back. It affords that kind of flexibility. A single mom, we have several of those, single dads, and it really helps them juggle their life and have that flexibility that they need. On the con side, to be fair, there are certainly some, like everything in life, it's a trade-off. Those are the things that I think over time we constantly try to improve and overcome. The biggest one is what we do in software development involves a lot of customer interaction. You really got to kind of engage in a consultative way and pull out of the customer what they really need. And quite often they're not technical. They're not in app development. They're in a business role. They know what they're busy. They have a day job. And so doing that remotely is more difficult than doing it in person. And so quite often we will travel and do that discovery and design type engagement on site. But with COVID, we've had to actually adapt to doing that all virtually as well. And, the cons get overcome, the big con that I'm leading up to is just, human communication, especially when it's voice only on a Zoom call, you're missing a lot. Body language is huge, right? I can't remember the exact studies, but I think, 70% of communication is nonverbal. There's something you miss when you're not in a conference room with the people that are dedicated and they're focused on the meeting, and you can get up on the whiteboard and you can collaborate, you can brainstorm, so I think we can all agree that today, since, so many more people have experienced, virtual communication, that, you get the person who's doing their email on the side or not really paying attention, and they finally get asked a question and it's obvious they have to ask you to repeat, well, what were we talking about? And besides just being maybe rude, it creates a level of inefficiency and ineffectiveness when people do that. So you've got to overcome that.
Well, going back to your comment about, engaging the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would imagine that is a challenge. But the customer has also has been forced to learn how to communicate with you virtually through this pandemic. So in a sense, everybody's facing the same kind of challenge.
Absolutely. And what we found, the secret, if I could, and I don't know that have arrived yet, this is an ongoing, kind of journey. The tools have certainly made it better. And I think the pandemic has made the tools improve quickly and proliferate really quickly. And that's put a strain on the internet itself, quite honestly. But when you can share, it's all about collaboration. And, we're really fortunate that what we do is create collaborative software for business processes. So we certainly drink our own champagne, and we're able to do that. And that's helped a lot. But even tools like, and I'm not trying to be a proponent for any particular company or software here, but, we adhere to the Microsoft suite, pretty common. We have clients that work in Teams. We work in Teams, Microsoft Teams. We have clients that work in Slack and Basecamp, and we work in that as well. And we have to be really flexible and meet our clients where they're at. Being able to share like the files, the chatting, the instant messages. We all started out a long time ago, and being able to do that and have threaded conversations and have the history and have any kind of files you might be sharing, like a client sharing an Excel spreadsheet or a process map. We do like virtual whiteboarding because a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? All those things really help with the customer communication. And there's been pros to that as well. Speed. It took, weeks to plan a trip to go on site for 3 days, and it was a lot more expensive. So virtually we can engage almost right away, and there's no travel cost. My people don't have to carve out of their life, childcare, pet care, time flying on a plane, etc. So really, there's a lot of wins to doing it virtually. You just have to make sure you don't miss what that client really needs. You don't that poor communication. You got to make sure you kind of overdo it. You got to ask more questions. You got to have more visuals, and that seems to work really well.
Well, I'd like to turn it over to Carl. I think you have a question, don't you, Mr. Walsh?
We know that you actually helped a vendor succeed, grow, and prosper by taking a direct position in the company. You actually grew that company and partnered with them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is something we're really proud of, and I couldn't have imagined when we started it that it was going to work out so well for us. But, again, going back right about 10 years, maybe 2009. 2010, we'd already been in business, at that point for about 4 or 5 years. And in what we do in software development, we do a lot of cloud, a lot of no code, low code. That's kind of the Invoke thing now. It was pretty new back then, but we also do need traditional software developers, traditional coders, who are working in various code languages and really doing it from scratch. And again, being virtual, this was almost even before that. We had to be virtual because it'd be almost impossible to find enough really good quality coders with the kind of specialties we need just in a small geographical area like Cleveland. And while we do have a couple that are still here with us in our little nexus around Cleveland, that luxury of being able to search globally now, not even nationally, for coders, really from the very beginning, we did that. And again, it was as much about being a startup and needing to control costs really tightly. We started this business in the real estate crash, back in 2008. Great time to start a business. So you can imagine, Carl, I know you're in finance, and and Doug, you in accounting, and trying to go out and get a loan, it was impossible for us. Even as a veteran, I couldn't get a VA loan. And it turned out to be a really good thing, but in the beginning it was a real hardship. And the way that relates to your question is that we had to go offshore. We had to find people wherever we could that were good quality people to get the job done for our clients. And it was wild, wild west in the beginning. So we were finding individuals on the internet, in India, Mexico, and China. We finally kind of started to say, hey, look, these guys, so they were, sometimes they didn't show up. And so we said, okay, well, we need to find a company to work with, somebody that's a little more stable. And so We had a gentleman who lived in Dallas named Kron Arora, and Kron is of Indian descent. Over dinner one night, we approached Kron and said, "Hey, you've been a great project manager, IT project manager for us. How would you like to start a company?" And he was like, "What?" And so that's the genesis that we ended up forming a joint venture with Karan, formed that company in India. And then Karan stepped out of his role and managed that company for us and really became a fantastic kind of resource manager, finding talent, making sure people were doing what they should, monitoring KPIs. To this day, Karan is still in that role. And it's worked out so well. They really feel like they are part of our company. They're part of our family. That we have incredible longevity, especially for India and for the IT industry. We've got guys who've been doing that now for 10 years. That creates a level of proficiency, efficiency, communication, and just kind of a tight teamwork that I didn't think we'd ever achieve with offshore. They're fantastic. They are fully retained. So, we're not like worried that, hey, they're now working for some other client that we don't know about and we're not getting their full attention. That costs more money, but it's well worth it. And that's how we maintain their longevity. We reward them really well. And I think they really feel part of something, instead of just being a contractor out there who doesn't know who they're working for.
Well, that just speaks directly in a very powerful way. Our principle that we have here at the Oval Table of working with your vendor, bringing the vendor to the Oval Table. You went a little bit further than that by basically creating the vendor or helping to create the vendor. And that's just a great example of how that can work out for any closely held business or any business, period.
And I know it's one of your principles, Carl, but it's so true. Even before MCF Tech, I was an engineer and then a leader in supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, and sourcing, things like that. And the vendors have great ideas, right? You gotta let them, give them permission. Same thing in a microcosm. My offshore coders have great ideas of how we might run our company processes better. But you've got to invite them into the table, the Oval Table maybe, and you've got to let them have a voice. And all of a sudden they'll open up and they've got all kinds of ideas for cost out, efficiency, better collaboration. It's really important, no matter if that vendor is a third tier vendor for General Motors, or a little small company like ours. I think those principles are universal.
I'd like to ask several questions here. One is that inviting the vendor to the table and getting the benefits that they have, do you think that creates a strategic advantage for you in your line of business?
I think it's our greatest strategic advantage. And here's why. There are other companies that are in the same, channel relationships and software. There's a lot of companies just like us that started out about the same time. And we actually know them all really well because of that. We used to go to the early conferences when there was only 9 people in the hallway. Right? And what I see, a direct example of your question, Doug, is that we began to create a capability gap, because of our vendor relationship, because we had such good coding to complement our business analysts and our technical leads in the US working with the clients as a team. Because of that, we started to get the enterprise level, the strategic level clients. And then we did the things we needed to do to compete in that market. You got to have insurance and all kinds of things to work, security, and that differentiator is what started that. And today we're the number one partner in our channel, and we're still small. I don't want that to come across as arrogant, but that's a big part of our differentiator, is that capability. And then it grew from there. We just had a all hands meeting with our development operations, which includes all these guys overseas. as well as our domestic and Mexican and European partners. And what do we need to do? What can we do better? What in our standards isn't working? What's the latest software coming out that we need to get everybody certified in? Just strategically, they're just at the table. I mean, I honestly don't think of them as anything different than our real full-time, W-2 employees.
Another issue that you brought up is the security issue. And here at the table, we handle a lot of information that is very privileged. It's very close-in information from various clients. And we also worry about our sense of security in the sense that when we have these interviews and we transcribe them, we're using a person local to us. We have vetted her. We review her work. We're paying very careful attention to how good a job she does for us. So how do you deal with the security issue when you get beyond people that are just close in where you can reach out and touch them?
Boy, that's a really good question, Doug. I really ascribe to a principle that there is no perfect security. But as a business owner, and I think you guys could probably relate to this, you've got to balance that with the business. You can lock things down so tight, people can't really do their job well. Carl, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say I had a conversation with Frank Abagnale, a fellow that was made famous by Spielberg's film, Catch Me If You Can. And of course, he was an expert criminal, and he became an expert at security after that. And he said to me, there are two types of businesses in this world: those that know they've been hacked and those who don't know that they've been hacked.
When you boil it down, I mean, it's the first rule is really common sense. It's something we did in the Navy in paper back when I was in the service, and it's compartmentalization of data. So that's one thing, right? You don't just want it out there for everybody to get to, because again, that human element is the weakest link. You have to be part of a project team, which is an assignment in a database that gets made and controlled, and you're active or inactive, and only active members of the team have access to the particular folder within our content management system where the client documents might be, right? So it's like a need to know control. And so compartmentalization is key, for us being virtual, but also almost all IT is virtual anymore in some way, shape, or form. The cloud, right, Carl? I mean, Carl's actually much more experienced in IT than I am, but you got to make sure you have encryption. That's your number one line of defense. And so, there's two legs to that. There's encryption in transmission of data when it's going over the internet between my laptop and, SharePoint, or some integration between two different systems that we're brokering for our clients. And then there's what's the data at rest, or, what's saved on a hard drive somewhere. It might be a giant hard drive in the cloud run by Amazon or Microsoft Azure or something like that, or it might just be the hard drive on my computer right here. So when you save data, that's when it becomes more at risk. It still needs to be encrypted. The last leg of the stool, and I'm trying to boil the ocean of security down here, is access, having the credentials to the password, if you will, right? And there's lots of fancy ways to do that between computers and between servers that aren't truly a human typing in a password, but authentication. Who can actually get to the authentication? And so we're really, really tight about that. And those things work well globally. And then at the end of the day, I think you said at the beginning, you're only giving the data to people that you've developed that trust with, because you've got to have that human element at the end of the chain. And you got to develop trust. You got to know people. You got to talk about it. You got to train them.
You talked about the benefits of working remotely and as a team and your radio show and things of that nature. What I wanted to do was understand what the problems are from one employee to another. So what problems do you see and what benefits do you see?
You can't have a water cooler conversation. You also don't get the gossip that you might around a water cooler. So there's pros and cons. It's availability too. You can't just walk over to somebody's office. Not that maybe you should do that anyway in a busy world, but you kind of have to virtually knock on the door. And that the instant messaging is right now I think the king of that. You can IM somebody. I could pull up Microsoft Teams and reach out and ask somebody a question. Again, it's written, which is even worse than verbal, which is worse than physical communication. So you have to be really careful about I think this is the big con, about being misconstrued. I mean, who hasn't gotten an email where they read something into it with their own bias that wasn't intended from the sender, or had somebody do that to you? We've actually done a lot of formal training around that. You got to be sensitive and empathetic to the recipient and how they might misconstrue it. And so you want to go out of your way to be really clear.
Well, that's why we focus on the profile so much, that knowing yourself and how you communicate, and then knowing the other person and how they receive information, and also how they communicate information back to you, is invaluable in terms of understanding them. Just a simple example I sometimes use is, if you send out an email, you receive an email that says you missed the meeting. Coming from Vaughn, that means one thing. Coming from me, and if you're my direct report, it means a whole different thing. So understanding how the information is being communicated, understanding the other person, what they mean. If your mom says you missed the meeting, it might be, "I miss you, son," or "I miss you, and I hope to see you next time, and everything's okay." But if you were the central provider in that meeting, or central presenter in that meeting, and the meeting couldn't function without you, then that means something entirely different.
It's like the old, when you tell somebody, "I need that ASAP," right? ASAP. One person reads that as, "Well, you need it as soon as I can do it." It might be next week. The other person might have meant, "I need it right away." And, that can be misconstrued. I think different people communicate very differently, and especially virtually when you get into a group setting. And again, I think everybody can probably relate to this more today than we could have 2 years ago. But there's the people who take over the meeting and they talk and you can't get a word in edgewise, right? I could be that person. But there's people with fantastic ideas or input, and if they're not invited into the conversation intentionally, they won't give that input. You have to make sure your facilitator is aware of that and is proactively getting that input, because again, especially verbally, there's no visual cues. You can't really raise your hand. And so it makes the virtual communication more difficult because of that. You can get to the end of an hour really quickly, and you only heard from 2/3 of the people at best. And I think that's something that we had to learn the hard way, quite honestly. And
the advantage of the profiles is who's going to try and dominate a conversation, and you also know who's going to sit back there and not saying anything, but also probably has the answer. And so you have to proactively go at that person and say, "Scotty, what do you think?" Because Scotty's not going to talk unless he's called on.
Right. And the dominant people need to be self-aware of that.
Right. Because the purpose of the table is to bring as much information forward as possible. And each of these people receive information in different ways. And so unless the table allows all that information to come to it, you are missing things. You're missing some very key piece of information that you could have otherwise have had.
We're also all different learners, right? People have different learning styles.
Right.
It took me a long time to really become self-aware that I am a hyper-visual learner. And so if I don't have a whiteboard or a chart or something, a diagram, it's hard for me to stay focused.
I just wanted to say thank you for joining us here at our Oval Table. Mike Hansborough, CEO of MCF Technology Solutions. And you can visit his company at www.mcftech.com. Thank you, Mike.
Hey, thank you guys. It was a pleasure. Really fun.
Wow, what a great conversation. Alpha Dogs are always the first in line for the good stuff. So remember to download your favorite episodes at theovaltable.com. Stay up to date by subscribing and review us on Apple Podcasts to let other top dogs know how much you enjoy these conversations. Now, let's go back to the Oval Table to hear what impressed the guys from the interview.
Well, that was a terrific interview and some time spent with Mike. And, for me, the big takeaway is that one of our principles at the Oval Table is that you work closely with your vendors. You seek the vendor input to improve the overall operation. Well, and Mike does do that, as you heard. But, in the early days, the way he tackled that challenge was he created a vendor. He actually created a vendor that he could work with who could bring not only the perspective of a vendor to the Oval Table, but could also bring the talent that he was looking for to accomplish, the kind of software that he was challenged to develop.
Well, let's get one thing straight here, and that is that Mike is a very forward-looking guy. He looks past the horizon. And I am impressed by, many things, but one that really stuck out for me is that many years ago, he came to a realization that many companies are coming to only now, and which was forced upon them by the pandemic, which is the realization that I don't need all this real estate overhead. There's ways to do this. Now, of course, the technology's gotten a whole lot better now, and Mike certainly acknowledges that. And so that's why companies are coming to that realization. But this just signals the way we work is going to change. It has changed. And a phrase that is way overused, the new normal, it does apply here. That remote working, that's the wave of the future.
Several things impressed me about what Mike was saying. One thing is that there are two forms of adoption. One that's obvious is that you have to change with customer demand changes, supply, and equipment changes. But what Mike did was he adopted his business to the way he wanted to operate while still serving his customers wherever his customers were, whatever his customers needed. So that's a different kind of adoption. I think that's something most businesses ought to consider doing. Another thing he did is you have to adopt your operation to master the customer involvement. Because what the customer wants and needs, you can't assume. You have to actually involve yourself with them in that way. And another thing I was impressed by was he went virtual, not out of necessity, as we would now, but out of desire to find the right talent to bring to the customer's needs in the right way. And that's a much more proactive way of going about things. And in closing here, I'd like to just point out to our listeners one other thing, that we don't discuss ahead of time what the opinions of three of us are going to be. We are free to bring any opinions we want. We are free to disagree. And that's the way your Oval Table should run. Wide open, lots of discussion, and new insights. And when you do that, you get much better information than you otherwise would get.
One other thing I'd like to add, gentlemen, that we didn't have the time to talk with Mike about is that he is a decorated Navy veteran. When we have Mike back, because we will, one thing I really want to talk with him about is how his time in the service influenced the way he manages his company. One of the things that we've talked about offline that we're going to talk about openly now is the notion of three questions. Three questions that every business person should ask both themselves and also their employees. Those three questions are, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And what should you be doing? Carl?
It brings clarity, really, to your process and to get you focused on, well, as you say, what you need to be doing. And something I'd throw on top of that is, what effect are you having? What effect should you have? And what effect do you think you're having, right? So bringing that kind of clarity to your operation and to just personally bring that kind of clarity to what you're doing is very, very helpful and perhaps even essential.
Well, I think the three questions are important from a number of avenues. One is you can start your day with just those three questions. What am I going to do? What should I be do? What would be better to be doing? Can I do something different? What would be more impactful? But you can also start your oval table meetings the same way. You could start, as we suggested in the past, how can we make this business better as a starting point? But you could also start and spend 5 or 10 minutes on these 3 questions. And you might get a diversity of opinion around the table as to what we're really doing and what we should be doing. And that would help you focus the energies going forward into a better light.
You might even bookend an oval table meeting. Start with those questions, end with those questions, and you just might get different answers on the second one.
That's true. I mean, where this started for me was I was general manager of a radio station up in Oregon, and we had our weekly sales meetings with the sales team, and that's where it began. Was and they all knew it. They the sales staff knew I was going to open the meeting with these 3 questions. Why? Because they were in the office. What are you doing? You're in the office. You're supposed to be out selling. What do you think you're doing? Oh, well, I'm going over my list of contacts so that I know who to call on today. Oh, okay. What should you be doing? I should probably be meeting with a potential client. Yeah, probably should. And it was so lighthearted. It was not heavy. It was a lighthearted approach to, as you say, Carl, to focusing people on what can they do with their time that really brings value to the business.
I think if you use that lighthearted approach, it starts to become a habit in the minds of everybody who's trying to make something happen in this business. Not just the owner, but everybody else around the table. It becomes a habit. And I bet that after a few weeks, they come to the table meeting with those questions answered in their head.
And if you are in management, a tier or 2 above the direct report of the person you're talking to, and you ask those questions, maybe they know they're doing the wrong thing. Maybe they're well aware of it, but they're doing it because that's what they've been told to do. And that's where you start breaking into the creativity and the problem-solving characteristics of your workforce.
It's true. It's like, are you appearing to be busy, or are you actually busy? And how much time are you spending every day moving paper around on your desk or surfing the internet rather than actually contributing to the success and the health of your business?
Carl, you bring up an interesting point about speaking up. And I happened to go into a pharmacy this last weekend, and they had a new system, and they had a new trainee pharmacist there who was just out of school or just still in school and doing her practice work. And I said to her, this system isn't working. She says, I know it isn't working. I said, have you said anything? No, it's not my place to say anything. It's my manager's place to say something. And I think here we would disagree with that substantially, that if you're having a problem in the field, you need to bring that problem up. Because in all likelihood, you aren't the only one with the problem. And so in this case, the larger company has rolled out from on high a program that I want everybody to use. It should work. Should work. It means you've tested it on the ground, customer to customer. No, we haven't done that. But it should work. Okay, well, then that's where problems get started. And that's where the motivation of employees get ruined. And they decide to go somewhere else with that kind of thing. They just get tired of that after a while. And so you really do yourself a disservice by not asking these questions and not taking the questions seriously. I mean, they're lighthearted questions, but on the other hand, they are serious questions, and they do really focus on value.
No podcast like ours would be possible without the help of some talented people behind the scenes. We would like to thank Audavita Studios and their director of podcast production, Sean Hedinger, recording engineer David Rosenblad, staging and show production David Wolf, social media Jay Spang, artist Marsha Carrington, and for our transcriber, Jamie Karras. We all hope you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time here at the Oval Table.